Hello and welcome to today's episode of Between These Spreadsheets. I've got with me today a gentleman called John Holland, and I'm particularly thrilled to have John here because he's going to tell us a bit about a subject that I've always been fascinated with, and I think it's very inspirational for people to consider floating their businesses, which is what John's very much involved with. So hello, John. Thanks for joining us.
Morning, Stephen.
What's your company called?
It's called Holland Bendulo. So
Okay.
I started the business, so I get to have my name in the title. It's only fair, isn't it?
It's very fair.
Yeah. So we started in 2004, and so I think we've been going probably longer than most people on the stock markets.
Yeah, because it's very difficult. So how do you get into this business?
Well, my path was quite interesting and probably not typical. I actually was a director of a growing business in the late 80s, and I left there and I did an MBA, and I wanted to do something different, and the London Stock Exchange recruited me, and I ended up then heading up, after some time, the UK regional operation for the London Stock Exchange, responsible for the two key markets that they operate. One is called AIM, which some people will have heard of, I've no doubt, and the other one is the main market. I then left the London Stock Exchange about 13 years ago, after 11 and a half successful years there, and happy years to set up Holland Bendulo.
Right, brilliant. So what does floating a company actually mean?
Yeah, it's quite an easy concept, really, although the markets do the best to complicate it for companies. Basically, it means selling off some shares in your business or a percentage of your business to shareholders. But the important thing to say is that you retain control of that business, even though you've sold off a percentage of that business. So for many companies, it's a win-win. And of course, most companies come to the markets and list on the stock markets to raise investment capital to grow their businesses. That's the primary reason. Other reasons, some businesses come purely for credibility and to enhance credibility, or to introduce meaningful share schemes to incentivize employees. And in certain circumstances, shareholders might want to, in existing private companies, may come to the market to facilitate a medium and longer term exit strategy. Yeah. But I think the primary reasons are the fundraising side of things. Yeah.
But it is a good exit plan. It is a good way of selling out without going through a business transfer agent. But it can be quite expensive, can't it?
It certainly can. It's not a cheap option. But I think one thing that's missed by companies quite frequently, certainly the companies that come to us, is that the majority of the costs of the transaction can be raised as part of the fundraising that a company undertakes when it lists. So yes, there are some upfront costs in advisor fees, lawyers and accountants, but the majority of those fees will be back-end loaded and dependent on success and taken out of the funds that the company raises. So that there isn't there's not a big hit on working capital and on cash flow. Yeah.
So what sort of money would somebody have to start with? So let's all, or everyone that's aspirational to this, let's see if they could do something now. What sort of money would they be looking at to say, like, I've got a company accounts director, as you know, if I came to you and said, John, I want to float this, what's my initial expenditure, and can I set that off by some speculative, is it a nomad or somebody in the field that could help me that way? So what's the cheapest way I can get into this?
Well, the cheapest way, there's a number of stock markets that are available for companies, and the smallest stock market and the least expensive is a market called Aquis. People probably may have heard of the previous name called NEX. So that's a small stock market which is geared to smaller companies. So you may be looking at £150,000 for a listing on a small market such as that, and then the fees tend to go up and reflect the size and credibility of the markets that you're actually floated on, and indeed the fundraisings that you undertake.
So is that money you'd need up front, or is that
No, you wouldn't need that up front. You would a percentage of that, perhaps, maybe 50,000 up front, and then the rest would be, certainly if they were our clients, we would ensure that the fees are back end loaded and largely contingent on success. So that if for any reason the flotation doesn't happen, then you're not faced with a huge bill of advisor kit fees. What I would say though, Stephen, is it's important, I think, for most companies that are thinking about doing a flotation, is to do a feasibility exercise up front, which we do which we do for a lot of clients, and that establishes if flotation is right for you, what sort of costs might be involved, and we also target those people who might be interested in supporting a flotation. So it reduces the risk of committing up front to a process and costs which might actually not deliver what you actually want it to deliver. So that initial step, if you like, dipping the toe in the water, is probably the most important part, because it will answer a lot of the questions that you have and de-risk the whole process for you.
My mum said she'd buy shares, so that's encouraging, isn't it?
It is.
So just going back to where we float, we've got Next. Oh, sorry, what's the new term for that? Aquis. Aquis, as in acquire. Aquis, and then we've got the alternative investment, like the AIMS, which is where most people want to be, and of course the London Stock Exchange is out of league for anybody I could possibly know. Well,
the London Stock Exchange actually own and operate AIM. So AIM is an LSE market, but it was designed to facilitate listings for smaller growing companies. So the regulation and to a degree the costs of joining AIM are more in line for smaller growing companies. Having said that, certainly costs of coming to AIM are going to be significantly more than an Aquis listing.
So what would the cost be for AIMS?
Yeah, it's probably starting at 300,000.
And what money would need it up front?
Probably 80,000, I think, is probably a good place to start.
But before we even put that money in, there'd be some sort of feasibility study. So what would that cost? Roughly,
probably £10,000.
So the first risk is £10,000 ish, and that would then give us a lot more confidence to find an additional £70,000, and then the additional 320 can become out of the income taken from investment and whatnot. So I think even though it is a lot of money, if people watching this are serious about really expanding, then having a PLC and floating it on one of the markets is certainly something to aspire to. I look at a PLC company not just as a method of exiting a business or making extra money or growing the business, but I think from a professional basis, it's like you've reached the top of your profession, haven't you? You've reached I mean, where do you go from having floated a PLC? Incidentally, you can have a PLC without floating it, can't you?
You can, but the two things are quite separate. Listing, the names are the same, but obviously that's all that's the same. A PLC in its true sense, if you like, in terms of the markets, is a company that's actually listed and has its shares trading on a regulated stock market. I should also mention, because we've mentioned Aquis and AIM, there are two other stock markets, both also operated by the London Stock Exchange. One, they're both called or come under the umbrella of the main market. Okay, but within that, there's two sectors. There's one that's the premium sector, which is for the big companies. So you've got the FTSE 100 companies on there. And then there's another sector called the standard sector. And that's, again, for probably smaller companies. And interesting, in the last year or two, we found many companies that would have normally floated on AIM have gone to the standard list, because the costs of listing on that may be circa £100,000 less than AIM. So it's a slight imbalance really there, because you would have thought, as you said earlier on, being on an LSE main market would cost significantly more, but actually the standard listing is probably slightly less than, or a fair bit less than an AIM listing.
I'm so sure there's some administrative reason for that, but so in the main, on this particular area, the best thing to do is for people to contact you, and you can appraise where they're going to go. I mean, if you contact me first, I can say whether you've got a chance rather than wasting John's time. And then if between us we feel there is something there, then we can bring John into the fray. So no, that's really interesting. So, but apart from the actual money side of things and what it will cost, are there any other criteria for you being able to float a company?
The rules for the AIM market and for the Aquis market, in effect, they don't really stipulate how small a company or a large company needs to be, or its profitability. So they're pretty flexible from a rules point of view in terms of what they would allow, what type of company they would allow to come to the market. Having said that, the determining factor is whether investors will buy your shares. So as much as the regulation is flexible, and you could probably tick box, most companies could probably tick box most of the AIM rules ahead of coming to market. Its question is whether, if they're looking to raise £500,000 or £1 million or £2 million, whether investors are willing to support their business proposal. Yeah,
and I suppose it's also, I mean, at the end of the day, you could have a startup company, a newly formed company, but if it's exciting enough and you're credible enough, and you can prove cash flows and you can prove profitability, and so a good strong business plan, I would imagine, is vital. And I would imagine the people involved in the company, I mean, can anybody float? Do you need to have any special qualification, or can it just be anybody on the board, or the directors or secretaries? Do they need to be anything?
Pretty much any company can float, but there are corporate governance rules. And generally speaking, even on the smaller markets, you'd be looking at a non-exec chairman and one other non-exec director. But those are probably people of the company's choice. So they're not people that the stock market would stipulate you have to have on your board. But again, if you're looking to attract investment in your company, it's important that you give investors confidence by having suitable people on your board. And there are lots of people around, as I'm sure you're aware, who are serial non-exec directors who are very good at taking that side of things away from the chief exec of a company. So they take on the city side, and so that the chief exec can focus on the business and not be distracted by the city side and the investor side. And that tends to work very well, actually.
And I'm sure you've got a list of people that you could introduce.
Yeah, we have.
And these are people that are paid once they're floated, or do they get paid before they're floated?
Yeah, generally they brought in prior to the listing, but sometimes late on in the process. So if the process of listing is say 4 months, then it might be a month or 2 months prior to the actual listing date that people are appointed to the board. And so investors can have that confidence they're in place. Yeah.
And their salaries are, I presume, subject to market value.
They are. But they are, but probably starting about £20,000 a year. And you'd be expecting to get 2 or 3 days a month, and maybe more, out of some of those non-execs.
Well, I'm in the wrong business.
But some of those non-execs or most non-execs, I think nowadays, are there because they deliver. They actually add value to the company. So they're there to tick the boxes in terms of the corporate governance, but they're also there really to add some value to the business, whether it's communicating with the city or whether it's opening doors with expertise in your company's particular sector, where they can help bring in new business to your company. So companies have moved away from appointing non-execs purely because they are a figurehead, to appointing people who are known perhaps to the city, but also really add some value to the business.
No, that's wonderful. That's great. I've actually got a list of questions to ask you, but you've been answering them as we're going through. So you're making my life very difficult here. I think you've pretty much given everybody a lot of food for thought here in a very short space of time. So I'll go ahead and ask you, what's been your favourite project? Have you got one? Have you got a favourite? I mean, you don't have to name names. It's more fun if you do. But have you had a favourite project?
Yeah, I have got some favourite projects. Well, I'll
Yeah.
tell you that tend not to be favourites, and not because
Okay.
I don't
Well,
enjoy
let's go
doing
to that one. Just give us some gossip.
The very high tech ones and the biotech businesses can be quite challenging because I'm not a techie, and I'm certainly I'm not really an expert on biotech either. So when I get a 100-page business plan covering those businesses, it can give me a headache. But they can be great to do, but they're not always straightforward.
No.
Property, I many years ago I was in the property and construction sector, so in civil engineering. So those are favourite sectors of mine. At the moment, healthcare, for obvious reasons. We've got a number of healthcare listings going on at the moment, and increasingly renewable businesses as well. So those are quite exciting.
Right. No, I've never worked in this area, but I've worked in helping companies to franchise their businesses. And the one thing I found was that pretty much any business can be franchised, but it's the people involved. Some of them, they just can't be, And so it's all about the person, isn't it? It's about the culture of the company as well. I think it must be easy to work with. So any unusual applicants?
Well, we do probably 50% of our clients are non-UK businesses, so they're looking to come to London, and so we get some quite unusual ones, particularly mining, resource businesses. Not so much the businesses are unusual, but where they might be operating out of, from Colombia or wherever it might be in the world. So. And so those can be quite challenging in some ways. And I always say it sounds exciting doing a Singapore listing, but the reality is a Scunthorpe listing is much more straightforward to do, simply because of the logistics of getting there and getting them down to London, etc. But no, I think the geography sometimes makes some of these things quite interesting.
Right. Well, I noticed that you've been involved in hydro mining. How does that work?
Oh well, yeah.
Is that the currency rather than the using water to get stuff out of rocks?
It was a combination of the two, actually. Yeah, right. It was having the location of the mining near the dams and using the water then for the mining for the cooling. So that was that one. Yeah.
Yeah. So you've been involved in all sorts of things. I mean, this is. I was just so wanted to get somebody like yourself on to explain the way you've done. And I do appreciate that. And I think everybody out there, if you do have any ideas, or you do have a business that you think could be floated, or you have desires in that area, then please do contact me. You know how to reach me. My details are below. And you feel free to contact John direct if you want. His details are now appearing below. And I'd like to thank John very, very much for joining me today. It's been a very useful program, and good luck with what you do, and hopefully we'll be able to work together on a couple of projects in the coming months. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining me today. And I know John's got to go because he's a busy man. And I'll see you in the next podcast of Between the Spreadsheets. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Stephen.
Bye.